Welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and it's time for some more Strixhaven spoilers. Just first impressions here. Let's see if we can figure out how we're going to use these new commanders. First up, Simone, Quandrix, Prodigy. So 2 mana, a green and a blue. Human Wizard, 1/2. Pay 1, tap. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Okay, so we have a bad Walking Atlas, right? And this is obviously going to be a lands commander. 4 mana, tap, draw a card. If you control 8 or more lands, draw 2 cards instead. So this is obviously another simic lands commander, and you know it's tough to get excited because there's already obviously Tatyova is one of the most popular in the entire format. Then you also have AC, which you know the debate rages on which one's better. I don't know. That I don't have either of those as commanders. I've never played either of those. Which one's better? I don't know. They're both way better than Simone, though, that's for sure. Like, it's hard to get excited about this because there's already better Simic lands commanders, and she's not doing anything unique. She's putting lands into play, she's drawing cards. So why would you ever use this over... I'm just trying to think. So if you have a Retreat to Coralhelm, you pay 1, put a land into play, then you can untap her with your Retreat to Coralhelm and do it again, I guess, if you have a lot of lands in your hand. So untapping her, it would be big. You know, 1,000-Year Elixir obviously is going to go in this deck for sure. Obviously, if that's the kind of deck you want to play where you're playing lots of lands and drawing lots of cards, there's already a couple of commanders that have sort of cornered the market there, I think, right? Next up today, Belladross Witherbloom. This is the Golgari Elder Dragon, or I guess the Witherbloom Elder Dragon. 7 mana, 5 black green. Elder Dragon, 4/4 flying. Okay, so it's 4/4 flyer for 7 is not much. So let's see if this ability makes up for it. At the beginning of each upkeep. At the beginning of each upkeep, okay, that's always a very important phrase in Commander. Create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with this creature dies. Like, is this a thing in like Harry Potter or something? These pests that are everywhere? I don't know. It's a weird... There's lots of these cards that make pest tokens and then they die and gain you a life. So I'm not sure what that represents. But so you're getting a token on each player's upkeep. So that's pretty good. So, you know, lots of sack fodder. Reminds me of Tindershoot Dryad a little bit, right? Where it's making those tokens on each upkeep. So that's pretty good. The second ability, though, pay 10 life, untap all lands you control. Activate this ability only once each turn, of course. Pay 10 life to untap all your lands. It's weird. You look at that ability and you're like, okay, pay 10 life, that's a lot. But untapping all your lands, you know, just for paying life can be super good. Obviously, you can only do it once each turn, so there is no infinite combo here. However, like the first thing I think of is you untap all your lands, and if you then use your lands to gain life, right? So you need a mana sink that gains you life, because you can do this on each player's turn, right? So hello Juju Bubble, right? One of the worst cards ever printed. 1 mana artifact, cumulative upkeep 1. If you play a card, sacrifice Juju Bubble. So even if you play a land, cast a spell, anything, you have to sacrifice it. But it is a mana sink for gaining life. You pay 2 to gain 1 life. So if you have your Belladross and your Juju Bubble, I guess if you have 20 lands, so if you have 20 lands, you pay 10 life, untap all your lands, then you tap them all, and you can gain that 10 life back with Juju Bubble. And you can do this on each player's turn. And then if you have a Sanguine Bond in play, right, because you're going to put stuff in your deck where when you gain life, this happens, right? With Sanguine Bond in play, whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So on everyone's turn, you're going to be gaining 10 life, so you're going to be shooting your opponents for 10. So the game's going to be over pretty quick. Yes, I broke Belladross already, and I did it using Juju Bubble. I'm amazing. Obviously, that's not great. You're going to have 20 lands in play. There's got to be something better than that, though. It's not coming to me off the top of my head. But I think what you want there is a mana sink for gaining life. So I would build either around the first ability, and the second ability is just a bonus. Or I would build around the second ability, and the first ability is just a bonus, right? Just like a bunch of little blockers. Next up today, Black's Vexing Pest. 3 mana. Pest, so it's a legendary creature, Pest, 3/2. Other pests, bats, insects, snakes, and spiders you control get +1/+1. When Black's Vexing Pest dies, you gain 4 life. So I like that when it dies, you gain 4 life. Definitely not going to build your deck around that, though. That's just an added bonus. It is a tribal deck, right? It's tribal for pests, bats, insects, snakes, and spiders you control. So how many pests do we have? Obviously, just like I talked about, we have all these cards that are making these pest tokens, but I actually looked it up. There's Nuisance Engine, 3 mana, pay 2, you tap it and put an 0/1 colorless pest artifact creature token onto the battlefield. I mean, if it gets +1/+1, that's not bad, right? And then, of course, Signal Pest. 1 mana, it's a pest. It is the only actual pest creature. Well, now there's another one. There's Blacks. And it has Battle Cry, right? It's an 0/1, but it has Battle Cry. This is a very popular card. At least in Modern, it was a very popular card when I was playing because everyone put it in their affinity decks, right? Because it would just pump your whole team. But more importantly, I think this is an insect commander. People have been looking for insect commanders for a while. A lot of people use Mazarek as an insect commander because he's an insect, but his ability really doesn't apply. So, this is a modal card, right? This is black on the back, so it's a modal card that, is an insect commander. Man, bats though, that's the real, man, I would love to see if you can make a bat tribal deck with this guy. Is there enough bats out there? I mean, they're all black. I don't think that there's any that are green, but green's just a fantastic color, so it's just going to be great support for a deck like that. Basically, these modal commanders, pretty much all of them from what I've seen so far, you only build one side. So basically, the fact that they're modal just gives you a free color, right? That's basically all that's happened. These MDFC commanders just give you whatever colors on the back, you just get to use a free color in your deck. So I don't know. It's kind of, again, you're sort of skirting the rules here a little bit because you're only going to build around the front side. The back side is a sorcery. Again, another sorcery in the command zone, 4 mana, 2 black. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put any number of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 3 life for each card you put in your hand this way. So right away, I thought of Moonlit Bargain, right, which is very similar. It's an instant. And you look at the top 5 cards of your library. For 5 mana, for each card, you put that card into your graveyard unless you pay 2 life. I think that's probably better. By the way, why aren't these legendary sorceries? You're searching for Blacks. That's like a mission or something. Like, I think that's a huge flavor fail on their part if that they don't have these sorceries be legendary sorceries. I think that's just makes more sense, at least, to have a legendary sorcery in the command zone than just a regular old sorcery. Can you build your deck around this, right? Again, this has nothing to do with the front, so you're never ever gonna, if you make a Blex deck, that's gonna be, insect tribal, spider tribal, so you're never gonna cast this because all it does is just increase the commander tax on the front side, which you don't want to be doing because you want the front side. So you're never going to cast this. So then the only time you would use it is if you built your deck around it. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put any number of them and the rest in your graveyard. I mean, yeah, I guess. Again, you get to use Golgari colors. The only thing is it's a one-shot. You're going to cast it. It's going to go to the graveyard or back to the command zone. Again, you can do the thing that I said about the other sorcery commander where you cast it, let it go to the graveyard, and then you can reanimate and get it, and it'll come back into play as the creature side. I guess you can do that. Next up, Mila, Crafty Companion. 3 mana, 1 white, legendary creature, Fox. 2/3, and it's red on the back, so this is a Boros commander. Whenever an opponent attacks 1 or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. Wow. So it's a Super Friends commander, without question. That's the only one way you build this deck, right? Whenever an opponent attacks 1 or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyal. Oh, wow. So this is like preventing damage to your planeswalkers, but it's even better than that, right? So if your opponent attacks one of your planeswalkers and you have 3 out, so first of all, it puts another loyalty counter on it. So if he's attacking your planeswalker that has 3 loyalty counters on it with a 3/3, it's going to survive because it gets 1 added when he attacks. But also it puts counters on all your other planeswalkers too. So even if he knocks out that planeswalker, all your other planeswalkers get an extra counter on them. Man, that's super good. And whenever a permanent you control becomes a target of spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Wow, that's also really good. That is a really good ability. Any permanent you control. So if they attack your planeswalkers, you get to put loyalty counters on them. If they target them with like an Assassin's Trophy or a Beast Within or something, you get to draw a card. Wow. On the back, Luca, Wayward Bonder. So it's a planeswalker, a Luca planeswalker, 5 loyalty counters, and you add 1. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. If a creature card was discarded this way, draw 2 cards instead. So that is exactly almost like Lord Windgrace's ability, except with creatures instead of lands, right? With Lord Windgrace, if you discard a land, you draw 2. So here it's with creatures. So already I'm thinking you want to do a creature deck, right? And then the -2, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. And -7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Wow, that's pretty good. So yeah, 100%. This is just straight up a creature deck, the Planeswalker side. So it's funny. Again, the two sides have nothing to do with each other. If you're playing this side, you're making a creature deck. This is a creature deck with a Planeswalker as the commander, and then the other side is a Planeswalker deck, a Super Friends deck with a creature as the commander. So yeah, either side is completely the opposite. One side's a creature deck, the other side's a Planeswalker deck. Next up, Mavinda Student's Advocate. 3 mana, 2 and a white, Bird Advisor, 2/3, flying, and it's got one of these 0 mana abilities. Oh, that's funny. I was just talking about how you don't really see that ever anymore. Not in a long time. So, 0 mana. You may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. Okay, that's a very unique in white. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. What? Okay, so you're never going to do that. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. So it's not a repeatable thing, and you only activate it once each turn. Oh boy. Really weird how they worded this ability, how they made it a 0 mana ability. You can use it, again, once each turn means on your turn, and then on an opponent's turn you can do it, and on the next turn. So the first thing I'm thinking of, because obviously you want to target your creatures with this. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more. So even if you cast like a Gift of Estates, because you want to go get some lands, it's not targeting a creature you control, so it's going to cost 10 mana, right? So you're just never going to do that. I suppose you can get into a situation where your opponent's attacking with a Blightsteel Colossus, and so you leave all your mana up, and you know, if you absolutely have to, that option is there, and you have a Path to Exile in your graveyard, and you can pay 9 mana and exile the Blightsteel Colossus. So that option is there if you need to, but man, you are definitely not going to build your deck around that. You're going to build your deck around targeting your own creatures. So right away, I'm thinking Feather. Is this similar to Feather where you are going to play lots of stuff like that? You know, cantrips. A lot of people play cantrips type stuff where you target your creatures and you draw a card. The only problem is here it exiles, so you don't keep getting it back. You can only do it twice, right? You cast it once, it goes to the graveyard, then you can do it again. So definitely a worse version there. I'm just trying to think. It's only instants and sorceries, and pretty much it's only targeting your creatures. And you can do it once each turn, so you can do it on everyone's turn. So yeah, that's where my head goes immediately, is just do similar to what a Feather deck does, where you cast those sort of cantrips on your creatures, and then you get to draw a card. I mean, it's good value. Next up, Killian Inc. Duelist, 2 mana. A white and a black, so an Orzhov commander, human warlock, 2/2. He has lifelink and menace. That's pretty good. Spells you cast the target creature cost 2 less to cast. So this is any creature, right? This is your opponent's creatures, this is your creatures. So if you cast an Utter End on your opponent's creatures, it only costs 2 mana. That's pretty good. And also, given that he has lifelink and menace, that makes me think that also you want to maybe make a Voltron style of deck. So yeah, maybe you want to do that, except most Voltron is not going to actually target your creatures though, right? I'm thinking, does this work with auras, right? So if you cast an aura on your creature, so it's spells you cast that target a creature. So a spell is something on the stack. It has to be on the stack, and it has to be targeting your creature while it's on the stack in order for it to be a spell that targets a creature, right? From my understanding, an aura enters the battlefield and then you attach it to something, right? Like Reality Acid, for example, that's something that people use in a Brago deck where they'll blink it, right? And then it goes out of play, and then when it leaves the battlefield, the permanent, you have to sacrifice that permanent, then it comes back into play and you attach it to something. So that's not, as far as I know, auras come into play and then you attach them to something. They don't actually target while they're on the stack. I could be wrong there. Maybe someone can correct me. Next up, Jazzy, Oracle of Arcavius. Oracle of Arcavius. 8 mana, 6 blue. Wowzers, that's a lot. Human Wizard 5/5, so I imagine we got some killer abilities here. Discard a card, return Jazzy, Oracle of Arcavius to its owner's hand. Okay, so it's going to be really, really hard to kill. Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Hooey. So, yeah, 8 mana is a lot, but that's a pretty good ability. First of all, there's a Simic commander. It's green on the back. It's another MDFC. So I cast a Cultivate, right? Cultivate's a sorcery. I reveal the top card of my library. If it's a non-land card, I cast it. I pay 1. So it's not free. It's 1 mana. This is what they should be doing. It should be pay 1. Instead of its casting cost, pay 1. Because at least then you can't go crazy. You still need mana, right? Free is just ridiculous. They need to stop doing that. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Untapped, of course. But obviously that other ability is way more important because now you can cast busted stuff off the top. You can cast Enter the Infinite for 1 mana. Obviously, you're going to want to manipulate the top of your library. And in Simic, there's tons of ways to do that. Sensei's Divining Top, Miri's Guile is a favorite of mine. Sylvan Library, lots of ways to do that. You can also just tutor stuff to the top. I mean, it cost 8, right? What can you expect for something that cost 8? And then, basically it's unkillable. I don't want to say unkillable, but discard a card and return to your hand as long as you have a card in your hand. And gee, I wonder if Simic can ramp enough to get to 8 mana, right? There is a backside though, right? So Journey to the Oracle, 4 mana. Again, another sorcery in the command zone. You may put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Then if you control 8 or more lands, you may discard a card. If you do, return Journey of the... Oh man. Did they actually make this easier? Okay, so you pay 4, you put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield. How many? I don't know. What are you going to have? 3 or 4? Then if you control 8 or more lands, oh boy. So this is the first time I've actually seen the backside really helping the front side. This is the first card that actually the back and the front work together. And of course they had to do it on a card like this. And of course they had to do it in Simic. So what you're going to do is you're going to wait. You're just going to fill your hand. Rather than just playing ramp, you're just going to keep the cards in your hand. I mean, you can ramp also, but you want to play, cast like Cultivates and Kodama's Reach where you get 1 in play and 1 in your hand, ideally. This costs 4, so if you have 4 lands in your hand, you cast this, you put the 4 lands from your hand onto the battlefield, and they're not even tapped. Now you control 8 lands, right? You have 8 lands in play. So you discard a card, who cares what it is. If you do, you return this to your hand. So now you're skirting the commander tax, and both sides of this commander cheat commander tax, which I wish they wouldn't have done that, because now you can, right, so you cast this turn 4, you can get 8 lands in play, and then the next turn you get to play this commander because now you have 8 mana, right? So man, honestly, the front side I was like, yeah, it cost 8 mana, not that bad. It has a super powerful ability, but so what, right? I didn't think that the backside was going to be so helpful. It is really helpful. And again, it has that protection ability. So, man, everyone's going to have to start playing, Stifle in their decks, or Sudden Spoiling, I think, would do the trick. You'd have to Sudden Spoiling and then, have another removal spell to get rid of this guy. Oh, dang. We were doing so good, and now we have a commander that I'm really, really not excited about because it's, of course, Simic. And they had to have at least one busted Simic commander in this set. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but again, I mean, how am I wrong? You play the Journey to the Oracle, right? You ramp, I mean, you're in green, turn 3 for sure, you're going to be casting this. And as long as you have 4 lands, so, put lots of lands in your deck, so you can just increase the chances you have lots of lands in hand. And then on turn 3, you cast Journey to the Oracle, and you have 8 lands in play on turn 3. And your commander's in your hand, and you can immediately cast it next turn. And then you can just start going nuts and flipping Ulamogs and time stretches off the top and paying only 1 mana for them. Yep. Oh well, there had to be at least one, right? I'm not a big fan of this at all. Anyway, moving on. And lastly today, Dinah Soul Steeper. Soul Steeper? Oh, she's drinking tea, I see. She's steeping tea. So she drinks souls, I guess. Is that the idea? Yikes. So 2 mana, black and a green. So Golgari, legendary creature, Dryad, Druid. So she's a Dryad and a Druid. 1/3. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. Okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. You want to be gaining life. It's not like a veto, though, where you gain that much life or lose that much life, right? Veto is whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. So if you gain 10 life, they lose 10 life. That's target opponent, though. Dinah is each opponent. So what you want, instead of gaining lots of life in a Dinah deck, what you want is lots of different instances, right? You want to gain 1 life here, 1 life, 1 life. Sort of like a Blood Artist, right? She's similar to a Blood Artist that way. Obviously, Blood Artist would be fantastic in this deck because every time your Blood Artist triggers, your opponents would lose a life. and you would gain a life, and then they would lose another life, right? The second ability, pay 1, sacrifice another creature. Dinah, Soul Steeper, gets plus X, plus O until end of turn, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. I mean, again, Blood Artist, so this is very Blood Artisty, or Zulaport Cutthroat. Zulaport Cutthroat's probably better in this deck because you're going to be sacrificing your creatures. Blood Artist is any creature, so that's why it's better, but it's only target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Whereas Zulaport Cutthroat is only your creatures, but each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So whenever you sacrifice a creature with Zulaport Cutthroat in play, each opponent is going to lose a life and you gain a life, and then that triggers your Dinah, and then each opponent will lose another life. So each opponent's going to lose 2 life every time you sacrifice a creature. I don't think the plus X plus O matters that much, although you can do like a Phyrexian Dreadnought, right? So if your Phyrexian Dreadnought comes into play and its enter the battlefield ability is a trigger, so you can respond to it, sacrifice it, and then Dinah becomes a 13/3. So you could definitely throw that in the deck. You know, you just wait for your moment where you have an opponent that's open, pay 1, Phyrexian Dreadnought, aha, surprise. Death Greeter is maybe the best card in this deck, because again, you want these instances of life gain. You don't want a whole bunch at once. You want little bits here, like everywhere, right? So whenever another creature dies, you gain 1 life. So every time you sacrifice a creature, you gain a life, then each opponent loses a life, right? When an opponent's creature dies, same thing, right? You're going to gain a life, and then each opponent's going to lose a life. That's the kind of stuff you want in this deck. Death Greeter, Zulaport Cutthroat, Blood Artist, those kinds of effects. It goes great in a Slimefoot deck. You know, if you have a Slimefoot deck, this is fantastic in that, right? Whenever a Saproling dies, you know, Slimefoot's going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain a life. Again, that's sort of Zulaport Cutthroat ability. And then if you have Dinah, she's going to trigger when you gain life and then deal. So this just doubles up that effect. And then she goes infinite, just like Vito. She goes infinite with Exquisite Blood, right? I mean, whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So you gain a life. All you have to do is trigger this, either with your opponent losing life. Again, just like with Sanguine Bond. Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood are the combo there. I think both of those cards are really going to rocket up in price. Buy your copy now, because with all these black-green life gain commanders, I think both of those cards are going to rocket up in price. And yeah, Dinah goes infinite with it, right? Let's say you gain a life. Each opponent loses 1 life, then your Exquisite Blood triggers, and because an opponent lost life, you gain a life, and then Dinah triggers, and, you know, infinite, just kills all of your opponents. Gains you a ton of life too, but not like that matters. Yeah, so another commander that has, you know, it's funny when I talk about cards to unban, and people are like, oh, you can't do that because it combos with this, or it does that, or there's this crazy thing you can do where it does this. Okay, how many commanders are there that just go infinite with 1 card? Like, come on, this is another one. There is at least like 5 or 6 commanders that combo with 1 card and win you the game. Or, you know, in the case of Zaxara, you put Freed from the Real on it and you get infinite mana, which is essentially almost winning the game. So here's another commander that just goes infinite with 1 card. And you like, why are you guys worried about that? You're worried about a card in the 99 that combos with 1 other card, and like, I don't know. It seems silly to me. I mean, we have all these commanders that are just going to go infinite with 1 card. That would be the least, you know, that would be the thing I'm worried about, is something in the command zone, right? In Commander, going on a bit of a rant here, but in Commander, the number one thing you have to be worried about is what's in the command zone, because your opponent has access to it immediately and always, right? That should be your number one concern, not cards in the 99, but anyway, yeah, again, a lot of really new, interesting commanders. Really only one dud. I would say Simone is kind of a dud. I can't imagine anyone's going to play that. Other than that, a lot of really interesting ones. So that is it for today. More Strixhaven spoilers, more exciting legendary creatures. Thanks for tuning in.